webinar on cyberbullying, the law enforcement perspective. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. My name is William Moore, and I am with the National Training and Technical Assistance Center. As your technical host, I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of the Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements to keep in mind. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be published on NTTAC's YouTube page. The webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can also view past webinars. For the event transcript and supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP NTTAC Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of the PowerPoint slides and other important documents, you may do so by locating the handouts pod directly above the chat area. Here, you will also find an FAQ for webinar participants that will likely address any technical related questions. Click on the name of the file and then click the download button. There will be a Q&A session where the presenters will address some of the questions posed during the presentation. Please type your questions into the chat box as they arise. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. Go to the chat window and type the total number of additional people that are in the room with you today. If you are viewing alone, there is no need to type anything into the chat window at this time. I will give our audience just a few seconds to do so. Please type in the number of additional people in the room with you today. Again, if you are viewing by yourself, there is no need to type anything into the chat window at this time. Only additional people in the room with you. Following today's webinar, attendees will be sent a certificate of attendance. This certificate is sent approximately 1 hour following the conclusion of the event and is sent via an Adobe Connect thank you email. Please keep an eye on your email for your certificate. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you will be provided with a link to a brief survey about today's presentation. The feedback you provide is used to assist in future planning and training. I will now turn today's presentation over to our moderator, Steffi Rapp, for today's webinar.
Thank you, William. Good afternoon. As William noted, I am Steffi Rapp, and I'm a program manager at the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention at the Office of Justice Programs in the Department of Justice. I would like to thank our presenters for taking the time to do this webinar and our audience for joining us to talk about cyberbullying from a law enforcement perspective. Our speakers are commanders of their state's Internet Crimes Against Children task forces. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force program helps state and local law enforcement agencies develop an effective response to technology-facilitated child sexual exploitation and Internet crimes against children. This program is a national network of 61 coordinated task forces representing over 4,500 federal, state, and local law enforcement and prosecuting agencies. As a part of their charge, these officers educate the public, raise awareness, and try to prevent and stop cyberbullying. Today we will first hear from Supervisory Senior Special Agent Johnny Hall, who is with the Northern Virginia DC Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. He supervises 23 full-time task force personnel along with 61 affiliate agencies. He currently serves as the hostage crisis negotiator for all major crimes in his region. Next, we will hear from Lieutenant John Pizzuro. Lieutenant Pizzuro is the ITAC Task Force Commander for the state of New Jersey and works for the New Jersey State Police. Lieutenant Pizzuro has extensive experience interviewing suspects, witnesses, and victims during the course of numerous investigations. His approach to these interviews includes the use of neuro-linguistic programming techniques and has led to numerous successful resolutions. And finally, we will hear from Lieutenant Brian Spears, who has been with the San Jose Police Department since 1997. In addition to working with the police department, Lieutenant Spears is a sworn member of the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force and has hosted and facilitated various law enforcement symposiums on child exploitation. In addition, Lieutenant Spears has served as a detective in homicide, assault, and financial crimes. Donnie, I'm now turning it over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. So my presentation is about cyberbullying from a law enforcement's perspective. You'll get some additional details from some of the other commanders and some other areas that are related and indirectly related to cyberbullying. Most of our modern day bullying takes place in a digital world. These things have some bigger challenges which create problems for law enforcement. And one of the issues are persistence. The digital devices are offering the ability to immediately and continuously communicate 24 hours a day. With this ability, it's often difficult for children experiencing cyberbullying to find relief and to get away from the actual abuse that's going on. Generally, this is permanent. Most information communicated electronically is permanent based on and public because of the way it's stored and it's kept. It's not reported in time. It can be difficult to remove from networks and internet service providers and other social media outlets. A negative online reputation, including for those who bully, can impact such things as college admissions, employment, security clearances, and other areas of a mature life. They're also hard to notice because teachers and parents may not overhear or see the cyberbullying based on its ability to remain in the digital world and how it takes place. It's definitely harder to recognize. Some of the common places that cyberbullying takes place are in the social media environments, such as Kik, WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, Skype, and Pinterest. Even though these areas in social media offer excellent ways to communicate, they can also be easily abused. Most states have laws related to bullying, but lack policy addressing some of the cyber components. Schools, law enforcement work together to reduce the number of cyberbullying incidents, but need more resources. The law enforcement footprint is generally attached with the school resource officers program to educate and monitor cyberbullying. These resources are often strained. Some of the other bigger challenges is the willful and repeated harm inflicted through the use of computers, cell phones, and other electronic devices. Sexting, sextortion is a major concern involving teens and technology. The abuse and trauma can be damaging and long-term. Repeatedly sending offensive and suggestive messages. A Florida case that is cited is based on some of the information how someone relentlessly encouraged someone to take their own life. And I'm sure you can easily Google the case, but basically it's a teenager who was repeatedly abused over social media. At what point when they actually did commit suicide, it was able to be evaluated by digital forensics and was determined that through the consistent abuse that the other two teenagers were charged with involuntary manslaughter. Willful and repeated threats to harm school personnel and attendees through the use of computers, cell phones, and other electronic devices are another issue. Often you've seen this in the national media, and it can be a very traumatic experience for the entire community. Cyberbullying component, but on a much larger scale, especially in a larger area and community setting. dangerous threats online. We'll also continue with how they get in place with not just the social media, but also the actual news media outlet. Some of that can also create additional panic and frustration with the public. And these are a few samples and examples of what has happened in the past. Some of the other logistics and what community outreach programs are challenged with is 39% of children or teenagers have given their personal information, such as name, sex, age, etc., over the digital world. And this goes unbeknownst to parents and teachers and other educators and other authority figures. 11% have met some face-to-face that previously met through the digital world as well. 29% say their parents would disapprove if they knew what they did and where they went and whom they chatted with online. Much of this you can also have found on previous episodes of Dateline, To Catch a Predator, some of those type of episodes. 36% don't discuss their online safety with their parents. And that's actually a number that is something that law enforcement works on to reduce, is to educate the community and educate parents and their community. Some of the Stop Cyberbullying campaigns and resources available out there are these here that I've listed on the slide presentation. I Keep Safe, StopBullying.gov, Cyberbullying.org, and the IACP.org Cyberbullying Resources website. Most of these offer great resources and reporting information that you can find and use to educate not just yourself, but also your community and your educational community. Again, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your presentation. I'll now turn it over to the next presenter.
Hello, how's everyone doing today? All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain science and what's happening more or less in society today. In the industrial age, Thomas Edison famously said, "I find out what the world needs, then I go ahead and try to invent it." In the internet age, more and more companies live by the mantra, create an obsession and then exploit it. And let's face it, this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have today in society. I'll give you an example. I was out to dinner not too long ago, and I watched a family of 5 sit down, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, with a mother and father, all 5 people. What they did was they were on their phones the entire dinner. They only looked up to order their food and then went right back to their phones. So why is that? Today we have an addiction, not just children, but society, of what's happening with our phones. So what happens is today with dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, there's neurotransmitters. And if you think about it, is that we today have difficulty just unplugging. As adults, we have trouble unplugging. So what does that mean for our children, our 12-year-olds, our 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds who live by their device? We have a computer in a pocket for everyone today. And the thing is that their life isn't shut off. You know, when I was a child, my day ended at 3 o'clock. Today's children, their day never ends. So there's 3 neurotransmitters that I'm going to briefly talk about. The first is going to be dopamine, the second serotonin, and third oxytocin. Our likes. Our world today is about likes. It's about views. It's about followers. We have people today, even adults, that when they post something, they're not happy because no one liked their post. We become dependent upon that. Now, let's take a look at children, for example. Who here in the audience, it's kind of tough to get a show of hands, but who here has posted a vacation photo, a photo that they were happy, a meal, or something along those lines that they've posted before, and they've gotten likes. Now, think about it from the children's standpoint. So their brains aren't really developed. You're talking 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And here they post something, and all of a sudden they don't get any likes. Now, what's happening is, in today's society, is that children, without those likes, they're looking for what they call dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that controls communication to the brain. It helps control the brain's reward and pleasure centers. More dopamine is also associated with greater competitiveness, aggression, and less impulse control. Think about this. So now we post something, and our children do, and they're not getting the likes. They're not getting the views. Consequently, some children do get those views, and they have to continually post things in order to continually look at it. So today, when children are posting something and they're not getting the views, automatically there's a lack of connection. See, there's 3 neurotransmitters that I've found that really work. So you have dopamine, which is that rush, which makes them feel good. However, they're not getting connection from other people. All their connection is through social media. We use social media to connect with people, but we do not know how to connect with people anymore. Serotonin, for example. Serotonin helps regulate your mood naturally. It makes you happier, calmer, more focused, but also requires people. You ever around 3 or 4 friends and you are just laughing about a story and you're telling a story and you're able to connect? Well, you can't do that through social media. So now today, our children become a little bit more ostracized. So they're not getting that connection from other people, and it doesn't get shut off. Another neurotransmitter that they don't get is oxytocin. And it's oxytocin is the hormone that underlies trust. It's also an antidote to depressive feelings. Again, it's connection-based. You can't take, technology has limited the connection that people have with each other. Our likes, our views, most of that impact has changed the way society now reacts to everything. And this is what's happening to children. One of the other things is that words have power. And what do I mean by that? So I study neurolinguistic programming, and it's about words. And today, without words are only 7% of communication. So today, when children see a negative word or a negative impact, they're looking at it at a screen and it has much more meaning to them because there's no other body language or tone or tonality to give it a different meaning. So when they're called something on social media and everyone is talking about them in a certain term, that has severe impact on them. I believe in females' case, children, that suicides have doubled. So what are some of the words that you're looking at? Think about this. You have whether you're fat, nerd, fake, this is what they see when they go home. There's no escaping that. And today's children, when they go home, this is what they're on. You look at every phone with every post. So, okay, now you're getting ostracized. And then secondly, what words you're getting. Oh, this person's stupid. Oh, you're weird. Or you're a loser. And what happens is belief structure. So the belief structure in the words is that we all of a sudden associate a meaning with those beliefs. And children aren't able to necessarily change that meaning in themselves. So when they see it, they start believing it. And it has a very negative impact, not only on their schoolwork, in school life, but their life. Because this is where this is the playground. There is no playground anymore. It's all on whatever app you are. And the apps that are out there actually help hide a lot of these things. So you're not going to be able to see it, whether it be Burn Note or whether it be Snapchat or a lot of apps utilizing self-destruct features or enable our educators and individuals not to actually see what's happening in the whole picture. And as Johnny had just pointed out, it wasn't until forensically did they find some of those things. So a recent study found that images are processed on average 60,000 times faster by the human brain than text as well. So 90% of all the info transmitted to the brain is visual. Photos are 40% more likely to be shared than text. And people retain 80% of what they see, 20% of what they read, and 10% of what they hear. So that is what is happening today with our children. And that's the difficulty that everyone encounters. So how do we convey emotion? Today we're in the world of emojis. Now, I don't know about everyone in the audience, but for me, I have to continually Google what emotion it means. And today we're using emojis more often. But just sometimes even an emoji and what someone takes as meaning. And that's the thing I think with cyberbullying too, is not only the aggressiveness of being able to really ostracize someone or go after someone social media-wise, but the feeling that it conveys, feeling that it conveys from an isolation standpoint and from being ostracized, as well as some of the hurtful things that are said. And emojis are no different. So what are some solutions? Proactive programs to equip children in navigating the online environment. I don't think we teach children. We give them a device. So a little story is that I was at Applebee's in Kentucky not too long ago, sitting with another fellow ICAC commander, and the parent came over and said, I just started working there, and I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, but you know what? I gave him an iPhone. Best babysitter in the world, these phones. I just give it to them and then they go. We give people licenses for cars or guns or medical licenses, but we give everyone a phone, and there are no warning labels on the phone. You grab cigarettes, there's a warning label on cigarettes. And I think that's what's happening today, is that we give everyone this phone and we put everyone in these chat rooms, and now the information that they are able to access and what information other people and how they talk is very hurtful, and people don't know how to get beyond that. Focus equals feelings. Reframe and don't engage. Now, one of the things that you can do is not to engage. It's kind of like getting that email or getting that text message. Just engaging that by deleting that and blocking that, it's not as much in your mind. But if you have to go online every day and see words that people are calling you, that cyberbullying is going to have an impact. Today our parents aren't as proactive with our kids. In the Applebee instance, you're going to have a 4-year-old and 6-year-old that either are going to be a victim or they are going to victimize someone else, because that's the online world. Unplugging. Social media and school cell phone policies. I would recommend in a school having someone that is in charge of monitoring social media, at least to give the idea of where your students are and what they're going through. Be proactive, looking for students that are isolated. Because today, it's that you could see, if you're looking at someone who has 0 likes, more than likely, that person is feeling withdrawn or ostracized, and they're more than likely to have a lot of difficulties and maybe being the victim of cyberbullying. As I mentioned before, the role of the story and storytelling. The story you tell yourself is the belief system that you have. So for our children, when they're being cyberbullied and they're being told that they're fat or they're not popular or they're a nerd, that story becomes their personal story, and that's what they believe. And it's very difficult for them to get out of that. And you have to teach children today to reframe and give them the ability to not believe that in that context, because kids can be cruel, and in online, that information is there forever. Conversely, if you tell yourself that you're not subject to that in a story, it has a more positive impact. One of the studies that what works to stop cyberbullying. We talk about being blocked, ignored, told parent. Notice call police is down at the end. Talk to them about it is down at the end. But those are things that we have to have. These are conversations we have to have. And now you're looking, this study was a nationally representative of 5,700 12 to 17-year-olds, but it goes younger today. Here's a couple resources I just wanted to mention. So we're talking about I Keep Safe is an incident response that individuals can use and schools can use in order to determine what to do in certain instances. You're able to, it's a response toolkit that guides facts and evidence gathering a way to minimize risks. Most of this starts with conversations, awareness, and education. This is a tool that will help. NetSmarts. NetSmarts Kids has a lot of different resources on there that was developed by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC. The resources are there. We have to take a more proactive approach. The idea isn't necessarily let's go call the police. We need to change what's happening today. Again, we're talking about a world of likes. We're talking about a world of views. And whatever is written, people believe it. We can talk about how anything that is written on the internet, people then believe it in a certain way. And if you write something negative and you're able to target kids in your school, it impacts you negatively. Cyberbullying.org, the Cyberbullying Research Center, is another resource that you can use. Here are some resources that I have found up here on the screen. Cyberbullying.org, www.commonsense.org, staysafeonline.org, violencepreventionworks.org, and obviously what I talked about in NetSmarts.org. Now, I think that honestly we need to spend a little bit more time educating, a little bit more time coming up with the policies and be more proactive. And let's face it, today everyone has a phone. Everyone has a chat room. I can give my phone to probably any child, and they can navigate any room and take any picture. But again, that is all online. And it's very easy for children to fall in that, whether they're being the bullier or being bullied. And the sooner we be proactive in it, the better we'll have a handle on it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Brian Spears.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. And I will be discussing, from a law enforcement perspective, sexting and sextortion. One of the things about this particular topic is challenging for parents as well as educators, because it's that fine line of those three-letter words, sex. So let's start by defining sexting. Sexting typically refers to the sharing of nude or semi-nude and sexually provocative photos or sexually explicit text messages via mobile phones, but they also can be performed by devices and or on the web. Usually, this involves two consenting people. However, what today's youth do not understand is if they are sending illicit images or someone is soliciting these images and the one person is an adult, we could be looking at a serious felony crime depending on what state. Some of the challenges that we see from a law enforcement perspective, first and foremost, would be teens are sending sexually explicit messages as images, even though they know such contents often get shared with other recipients. That's the first challenge. The other challenges also fall into play where, although most teens send sexually suggestive contents to their boyfriends or girlfriends, they also realize that this material is being sent to other individuals who are unknown in which they want to hook up or have an online relationship with. And then the final challenge is, despite these images were sent and intended for a girlfriend or boyfriend, most people are sharing them with other people whom they were never even intended for. According to Common Sense Media, body dissatisfaction appears to be on the rise in the United States. A study by the Keep It Real campaign found that 80% of 10-year-old American girls have been on a diet. 80%. A few examples of negative teen body images are all over the web. You'll find them on YouTube, Instagram, and in fact, we have some individuals that we come across that are begging for feedback. They're wanting advice on how to improve their image or their looks, and they're begging for this feedback from a bunch of strangers online. This leads to a problem that law enforcement around the country is starting to deal with, and this is where we beg and urge the collaborative effort to combat digital dating abuse, which is another form of domestic violence. With these devices and technology, we now have individuals who are sharing their locations with their so-called girlfriends and boyfriends. This allows for the individual recipient to now track their every movement, every location. Imagine this. We have junior high and high school students tracking one another's passwords, checking text messages, controlling and questioning who is talking to where and where are you at. The constant messaging, the sense of control and manipulation, the pressure and coercion is huge. And this has to be recognized now. In another survey from the National Campaign to Prevent Teen and Unplanned Pregnancy, 1 out of 5 teens reported that they have electronically sent or posted online nude or semi-nude pictures or videos of themselves. When you think about it, we have an estimated 90 to 95% of school kids carrying cell phones. Not only are cell phones, but some schools require tablets or the notebooks that have internet connectivity. This is a trend we cannot afford to ignore. The role of technology. The access to computers and other technology-related communication devices in the United States today has increased at an unmeasurable rate. Smartphone devices with internet connectivity are becoming more and more common amongst youth. In fact, some smartphone devices don't even have to be operating. You can still utilize a smartphone, even though it doesn't have the actual operating AT&T or Verizon. All you have to have is internet connectivity. Unfortunately, child sexual offenders are also utilizing technology to further victimize our youth. They're capitalizing on the anonymity the internet offers to make direct contact with unsuspected youth. So let me define sextortion. Sextortion, the practice of forcing someone to do something particularly to perform sex acts by threatening to publish naked pictures of them or sexual information about them. I wanted to share a little bit of information about a case that was worked in the Bay Area out in California. And obviously I've changed the names, but this should sink home to a lot of our educators and parents, regardless whether you're in law enforcement or not. And it's titled, I Was Just Trying to Help. Lily was a 12-year-old 7th grader, and on a Sunday evening, she received a DM, a direct message, from a friend by the name of Kate. Kate was a school friend. Lily thought the message was strange because Kate was already a known friend, but the direct message received was from a different account screen name. The message relayed information about feeling depressed because at school she was being bullied about her body image. Lily was sympathetic and began corresponding about body shaming and bullying. After several messages between the two, Kate asked if she could send Lily a picture of her body to seek her opinion. Kate begged and pleaded for Lily's opinion about her body. Under the pressure to aid Kate, Lily agreed to view the image. Lily received a picture depicting a young female's bare breast. The image did not depict a face or any other identifying characteristics. Lily was not expecting to receive the nude image and felt very uncomfortable. Lily reassured Kate her body was fine. Kate then requested Lily send her an image of her body so she can conduct a comparison. Initially, Lily refused to do so. Kate began getting upset and threatening to harm herself. Under the pressure to help, Lily took a selfie of her breast, which included her face. Kate received the image and her online demeanor immediately changed. Kate threatened to send the image to all of Lily's friends if she did not comply with her demands. The investigation would reveal Lily was not the only victim. The suspect, an adult male residing in New York, strategically targeted Lily and several of her friends. He created fictitious accounts by utilizing their names and other pertinent information he obtained from their online profiles. Who are the victims of sextortion? Well, 78% of the reports involve female children and 15% involve male children. I'm going to tell you that this is on the rise, on more of a 50-50, if not the male victims are failing to report, but definitely on the rise. Male and female children each range in an age from 8 to 17 years of age. However, at the age of 15, were compared to female children, it was less common for male children to be on the younger end of the spectrum. So in essence, we're seeing more the older females being targeted, younger females being targeted, and older males. And 24% of the reporters mentioned that they suspected or knew that that additional children were being targeted by the same offender. How does this happen? Well, there's many different manipulation tactics are being used by offenders, often in combination, to achieve their apparent objectives. The most common tactic that reporters indicate where the offender threatened to post previously acquired sexual contents online, and often specifically threatened to post it in a place for family and friends to see if the child did not comply. Where does this happen? Sextortion most commonly occurs via phone, tablet, messaging apps, social networking sites, and video chats. In a typical incident involving multiple platforms, the offender approaches the child on a social network site where they learn personal information about the child, such as who their family and friends are or where they go to school. The offender then attempts to move the communication to an anonymous message app or live stream video chat where they obtained sexual explicit content from the child. What are the effects of sextortion? As a result of sextortion, child victims commonly experience a range of negative outcomes, including hopelessness, fear, anxiety, and depression. Overall, it was indicated in 13% of cyber tip line sextortion reports that are received from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, child victims have experienced some type of negative outcome. Of these reports with some type of negative outcome, it is indicated that 1 in 3 children had engaged in self-harming, threatening suicide, or attempting suicide as a result of the victimization. Some of the resources are listed here on the attachment, where some of the statistics and information that I utilized can be found. My final message to the audience, as well as with my contact, the powerful message that I found from Pam Leo. Let's raise children who won't have to recover from their childhoods. I read that that's an attachment to every email that I send out, and each time I look at it, I find it grows more and more powerful. Thank you. Now I'll turn it back to Stephanie.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks everybody. I really appreciate all of you. The presentations were very informative, and now we're going to take a few questions. The first question that I see says, do you think that having a social emotional learning component within the schools would help with prevention of cyberbullying? Who would like to answer that one?
I'll say this is John Pizzaro. Yes, absolutely there needs to be a program dedicated. I think we go out, I know ICAC, we'll do our presentations, they're an hour. Sometimes we'll go to different schools, but it's not in the curriculum. Back years ago, I remember health would talk about certain aspects of things, but today there's not a concerted effort to talk about that and the impact. Considering the use that everyone has today, especially with the likes, especially with the views and how everyone utilizes it, not to talk about it at an early age, I think is problematic. I think if you want a solution, I think that's something the schools should be talking about that at a younger age.
Thank you, John. I happen to agree as well. I think that doing universal prevention of bullying and cyberbullying would be extremely helpful, and to teach kids kindness and respect and empathy is something that unfortunately doesn't come naturally all the time, and that we need to instill it and definitely teach our kids how to be resilient and how to be kind to one another. Let's see. So the next question is, how do police officers, school resource officers, or police officers that are called in handle sexting that they find out is happening at school? Is there one way police handle it, or does it depend on the specific state or agency? Brian, do you want to take that?
Sure. Often I can tell you that it does depend on which agency and which state. In California, the way that I've trained my school resource officers is when they respond to the school, we need to determine the other recipient. Is this an adult or is this a known juvenile? And if it's a known juvenile, at this point, I really encourage the school resource officer to reach out to the parents and bring this information to the forefront at home. The reason I say that is the parent is the one who furnished the device. Usually it's a smartphone. And all too often, parents, I find, constantly want to depend on the school system to provide sex education. And that's a parent's job. You know, I truly believe it is a parent's job to talk about sex and the birds and the bees. And the school does facilitate training. So what we do is we encourage calling the parents, have them respond to the school. That way the phone can be turned over to the parents. And prior to that, what we do is we actually erase or factory reset the information. We also tell the parent that these images may be stored on your cloud system at home. And depending on those images, we notify them that you may be in possession of child pornography if you do not take a proactive approach on erasing this. Usually that really grabs the parents' attention, and they respond to the school, despite how busy they are, and we try to keep them involved. That's how we handle it in Northern California.
Thank you, Brian. This is to piggyback off the initial question. Do you think that schools and educators should incorporate social media and understanding the use of social media as a part of an educational curriculum? What are your thoughts on that? Johnny, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, Steph. You were broken up there for a second. What was the last part?
Do you think that social media, that schools and educators or school resource officers that can do workshops in schools with youth should incorporate social media and good digital citizenship as part of the curriculum, educational curriculum?
Absolutely. I think it's critical for all of the community to have a participation, understanding the interactions with social media. I mean, they're a part of everyday life. They're not going away anytime soon. And it's better that parents and the school systems, along with law enforcement, take a more proactive role in a more collaborative effort to continue to educate ourselves and at the same time to guide our children. It's a big team effort, and it's not something that will ever go away. I'm sure in time, as the school systems develop more technological advances where they can actually produce the educational tools and make them more readily available to children and parents, will be an excellent service. But getting to that point, meaning like those technologies in the school system and educational tools, is going to be some undertaking just based on the way the country is designed. Not every school system has the most advanced technologies and sometimes tend to be behind the curve. But yes, I would agree. They absolutely do.
Okay. Thank you. With instant messaging and Snapchat during online games that self-destruct and disappear, is it possible to pull them back through cyber forensics so they're not gone forever?
I'll answer that. Yeah.
Go for it.
Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead, buddy.
The answer is yes. Those things can be recovered through forensic services. And the way things are moving and progressing, not only are they able to be contrived and collected from the device itself, we're talking about cloud technologies and things like that from the providers. They're also availability through there as well. So there's going to be where there's multiple footprints throughout the digital world where these actual conversations, pictures are going to be able to be recovered, and the tools are improving every day. So the answer is yes, and it's going to get much more detailed as we progress.
Okay, thank you. Brian, I think this question is for you. Why do you think it's the duty of the parents to lead or completely dictate the discussions regarding sexual education?
Steph, you said why, what was that again?
Why do you think it's the duty of the parents to lead or completely dictate the discussion regarding sexual education?
Well, it's my personal belief that when it comes to sex, it has to start off at home, because a child won't know what's appropriate touching or inappropriate touching. We cannot allow an education system to be dependent on furnishing that information. So how would a child at the age, well, let's start with kindergarten and up, how would they know what's appropriate or inappropriate? That's a discussion that definitely has to start at the home front and continue to blossom with what is appropriate and what's not. And then they hit that age where now they're curious about their bodies changing and their feelings for another person. I strongly believe that is up to a parent to share that information and to discuss how they were, they were a product of love. Tasking that to an educator, I find, can be really challenging, and I can see parents being upset and stating, I didn't want them to know that. So I think it's incumbent upon a parent. That's what it is, Steph.
Okay, thanks. Do you all believe that there's age-appropriate consideration one should take into account prior to engaging in presentations on cyberbullying?
I think it depends on the age. It depends on the school. I think it depends on where you are. I mean, I think that even from a young age, I think you can have those discussions, especially what the phone is about, what it does, and how people talk about it. So to answer your question, I think the sooner or younger you start, the better off you are.
Okay. How long should I allow children to stay online or interacting with social media? Johnny, what do you feel is an appropriate amount of time that kids should be able to use social media, or should they be taking breaks and having to put their phones down?
I think it's a lot of that has to do with age, between age from now at beginning at toddler on up. I know what my pediatrician recommends for my youngest up to my teenagers, and from the youngest, she's asking no more than an hour and a half, 90 minutes a day of any online activity at all, with whether it's apps or games on an iPad, etc. Up to 2.5 hours most for my teenagers. But again, they're plugged in all the time. I think one of the critical things that John brought up earlier was how much children spend online in a disconnected social environment. So I'd say it'd have to be low in order to maintain a good, healthy outcome with their community and their friends and their parents and other family members. And that's kind of what I'm guided by. I take her advice well, but there's many statistics out there. IKeepSafe.com is a good place to go. They have lots of resources on there as well, talking and discussing the same type of questions you just posed.
And to piggyback what Johnny just said, is that the hour before sleep is the worst thing, not just for children, for adults, because you have that blue screen, and having a phone next to your bed, and some of us have no choice because we're on call, but having that screen activated is one of the worst things you can do for your brain, because your brain doesn't shut off. So as adults, if it doesn't shut off for us, what about children? I mean, for example, the last hour before sleep, really, honestly, they shouldn't be on any type of electronic device, because their brain activities can continue to work, and that's why most children won't fall asleep.
Okay, thank you. If you have an app like Smart Family, which blocks on a child's phone, is that enough to ensure their safety? What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think an app is simply an app, and I think I encourage utilizing apps. However, I go right back to having parents involved. I encourage parents to set passwords on the smartphones, so which a child does not have the capabilities of just downloading what they want whenever they want. There is a way for parents to actually create a password. So when you try to download an app, whether it's a Android or an iPhone, it requires a PIN number. And that's a great segue for parents to have that discussion of what's the app and what are they doing with it. But it also goes back to, is this child old enough to be given a smartphone? They still do make regular phones that you can dial out for safety reasons and things like that. But I would not just leave it up to an app to monitor and kind of be the virtual parent. It has to be a collaborative effort between the parent and this app, and constant communication with the child, even on these difficult subjects.
Thanks. Someone mentioned online, has anyone ever entertained the idea of youth leaders? And she then went on to write, children educating their peers on the subject of unplugging and not engaging. Sounds like a great idea to me. What are your thoughts? Do you want to respond, Johnny?
One more time, Stephanie. I'm having issues with audio over here.
What are your thoughts about having youth leaders and peer leaders and having them engage with other children on how to unplug and try to get youth to change the peer culture?
Yeah,
I think in a digital world.
No, I think all of that's a good, healthy approach to trying to get children to reduce their online activity. And as Brian alluded to before, a lot of this does start within the home, and parents and family members and older family members in charge of younger family members setting some boundaries, healthy boundaries. And without those boundaries, we're not helping the children. So I think we really need to work on how that works from within the home, and then include those other resources and available to us to kind of reinforce that. And because the more that children become aware that not only does it start from the home, but it's also out there in our community and our world around us, they're more accepting to take that approach. And eventually those peers will succumb and help educate their own, which is really a healthy approach. But yes, community peer groups with other teenagers and kids, that's a huge benefit. Obviously they're going to listen to them.
Got it. Well, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the presenters, and I want to thank the audience for all of your participation. I want to remind you that if you need additional information on cyberbullying, you can go to stopbullying.gov as well. And I'm going to turn it back over to William.
Great. Thank you, Steffi, and thank you to our presenters for a very intriguing and very beneficial discussion today. Before everyone adjourns, I just have a few announcements and reminders for everyone. If you all please join us for part 2 of our webinar series, Cyberbullying, What You Need to Know. This webinar is scheduled for October 23rd at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The registration link is available on this slide. You may contact NTTAC through the website displayed on this slide. You can stay up to date on the latest information by signing up for NTTAC's TTA listserv, and also don't forget to check us out on Facebook at OJJDP TTA. You can also contact OJJDP via the Help Desk by following the contact information on this slide. And just as a reminder, the webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube page, and supporting resources can be obtained by contacting OJJDP's Help Desk at OJJDP@USDOJ.gov. Please take a few seconds to review the disclaimer here. And lastly, I wanted to remind everyone to please take about 5 minutes to complete our feedback survey. At this point, I will actually have the feedback survey available here. You all can access the feedback survey directly through the pod above. And if you didn't get a chance to complete the poll before, please take a moment to do so now and let us know your profession and your field of expertise as well. I'll leave this up for just a couple of minutes after the webinar. But again, thank you all so much for joining us for today's webinar, and please have a great afternoon. Thank you and goodbye.